They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but Karen at Willow Creek HOA sure thought she could rewrite the whole library. I was the simple woman with scuffed sneakers and a dusty old pickup, clearly beneath their fancy garden parties and endless bylaws. Too bad for them. The nobody they laughed at was about to blow their little kingdom wide open, starting with one unforgettable shot. It all began on a humid Saturday morning at the Willow Creek shooting range, tucked just a mile past the subdivision's manicured gates. I'd been living in Willow Creek for about 6 months, long enough to know that if your mailbox flag wasn't the correct shade of red, you'd get a $50 violation fine by noon. Karen was the self-proclaimed queen bee of the HOA, a power-hungry woman with a clipboard permanently fused to her hand and a talent for making the smallest rule feel like federal law. She wasn't elected, of course. No. She simply declared herself interim president after manipulating enough proxy votes at a community barbecue last fall. Free hot dogs really can buy democracy. Who knew? The shooting range had been a public feature on the outskirts for decades before the HOA even existed. But that didn't stop Karen from treating it like her personal fiefdom. She generously allowed residents to use it if they followed her 14-page rulebook, paid a $25 safety fee, cash only, and, most importantly, knew their place. And me? I was definitely not in my place. You see, I didn't look like the right type to Karen and her polished Lululemon-clad committee. I wore worn jeans, tied my hair in a messy braid, and didn't bother with fake smiles. To them, I was invisible, or worse, an eyesore. So when I walked up to the range that morning cradling an old Remington Model 700 like a baby, the sneers practically slapped me in the face. "Oh, ma'am," Karen said in that syrupy tone. "Only trained people should be here. We wouldn't want accidents." Laughter trickled around her like a pack of mean teenage girls at a mall. I smiled politely. "No worries. I signed the waiver." Karen's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, wrinkling her nose like she caught the scent of poverty. "I suppose you can try, but you should know we have standards here." Behind her, a large banner proudly proclaimed home of Tyler Briggs, 5-time Willow Creek shooting champion. Oh yes, Tyler Briggs, their golden boy, Karen's nephew, HOA darling local legend. He held the range record, a near-perfect group at 500 feet. No one had come close in 5 years. His framed photo even hung in the community clubhouse, right between the bylaws bulletin and the warning about unauthorized flower beds. As I loaded my rifle, I could hear Karen's stage whispering to the others. "Bless her heart, it's cute. She thinks she belongs here." They watched like vultures waiting for a stumble. I took 1 breath, 2, adjusted my grip, then I pulled the trigger. Crack. The bullet punched clean through the target, a dead center hit so perfect even the electronic scoring system blinked twice like it couldn't believe it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's smug grin faltered. "Beginner's luck," she snapped. I chambered another round. Crack, crack, crack. 10 shots later, I lowered my rifle. The digital scoreboard refreshed with a mechanical ding. And there it was. New record. 500 feet, 10 perfect groups. 25 spread. Tyler Briggs' 5-year reign over the range was over in less than 3 minutes. Dead silence. Karen's mouth flapped open, then closed like a goldfish gasping on dry land. A slow, sarcastic clap started somewhere behind me. Then another, until even a few of her loyal toadies couldn't help but join in. I just tipped my ball cap, slung the Remington over my shoulder, and said sweetly, "Guess those standards aren't what they used to be." But oh, this was just the first shot fired. Karen and her cronies had no idea what storm was coming next, and it wasn't going to be nearly as polite. After that first record-breaking shot, you'd think common sense would kick in. That Karen would leave me alone. Bless her heart, she doubled down. See, people like Karen don't survive on humility. They thrive on control. And nothing threatens a control freak like someone succeeding outside their rules. By Monday morning, an email blast had gone out to the entire Willow Creek community. Subject: Important update to shooting range rules. Safety first. Translated from Karen's speak. We're moving the goalposts because you embarrass me. Suddenly, new policies appeared like weeds after a rainstorm. Now you needed a certified Willow Creek HOA shooting license to use the range. Funny thing, the only way to get licensed was to attend a mandatory safety seminar led by none other than Tyler Briggs for a small administrative fee of $200. Oh, and attendance would be by approval of the HOA board. Guess who sat on that board? Yep, Karen, her best friend Nancy, her second cousin Eddie, and Mr. Collins, who only showed up for meetings when there was free pie. Now, it's worth mentioning that Willow Creek wasn't just some sleepy retirement village. It was a mix of older folks, young families, and a few of us outliers who didn't exactly fit the white picket fence mold. The HOA had gotten away with nonsense for years because, honestly, most people didn't have the time or energy to fight back. But Karen had miscalculated one important thing. I wasn't just some random nobody. I grew up in the high desert of New Mexico, where hitting a tin can at 500 feet wasn't a party trick. It was dinner insurance. Later, I spent 12 years in the Army. 9 of those as part of a long-range reconnaissance unit. I knew my way around a rifle the way most people know how to work a microwave. And perhaps more dangerously, I also knew a thing or two about legal codes, small-town politics, and exactly how HOAs could and couldn't operate under state law. But I wasn't ready to show all my cards yet. No, that would ruin the fun. The next Saturday, I showed up at the range again. Same dusty pickup, same battered ball cap. This time, a brand new laminated sign greeted me. No unauthorized individuals beyond this point without proper licensing. Karen herself stood beneath it, arms folded so tight, she looked like she might snap in half. Tyler Briggs lounged nearby, twirling a set of keys like he owned the place. Sorry, Karen said with an oily smile. New policy. You'll have to leave. Behind her, a small crowd had gathered. The usual HOA loyalists armed with lawn chairs and travel mugs, ready for another round of public humiliation. I scratched my head, playing dumb. Oh, no worries. I'm actually here to sign up for the safety seminar. Karen blinked. The seminar? Yep, I said, pulling a money order from my back pocket. Got the fee right here, non-refundable, right? The corner of her eye twitched. She hadn't expected that. Well, there's also an application process, she sniffed. We can't just let anyone in. Of course, I said sweetly. I already emailed it in last week. Should be on file. I knew full well they hadn't processed it, because under HOA law, they had to respond within 10 business days. And if they didn't, the application was considered approved by default. A tiny, obscure bylaw Karen herself had pushed through last year when she wanted her niece's lemonade stand approved. God, I love irony. While Karen scrambled to come up with a reason to ban me, the winds around Willow Creek were starting to shift. See, my little accident at the range had sparked rumors. Some people, especially the old veterans, started asking questions. Who is she anyway? You see that grouping? Ain't no way that's beginner's luck. Why is Karen making it so hard for folks to use the range all of a sudden? The cracks were forming, even if Karen couldn't see it yet. She thought she could stomp me out like a weed. But the thing about weeds is they're survivors, and some of us come with thorns. Later that afternoon, Karen held an emergency HMA meeting at the clubhouse. If you've never had the pleasure of sitting through one of these things, imagine a kindergarten class run by people who think Robert's Rules of Order is a sacred text. Karen stood at the podium, all self-importance and freshly dyed hair. We must protect Willow Creek from outside influences, she announced, practically vibrating with righteousness. If we let anyone access community amenities, we risk property values, safety, the very integrity of our neighborhood. Translation: she was terrified someone might reveal she wasn't nearly as in control as she wanted people to believe. I sat quietly in the back row sipping lukewarm coffee and smiling. Karen thought she was shutting me down. She had no idea the fuse was already lit, because what Karen didn't know yet was that I had spent the past 2 weeks gathering receipts. I had a folder thicker than a Thanksgiving turkey full of HOA violations she'd ignored for her friends but weaponized against newcomers. I had video footage of her cousin Tyler using the range for paid lessons without permits. I had emails where she bullied residents into proxy voting for her policies. I had enough ammo to make Fort Knox jealous. And legally, every single one of them was a violation of our state's Homeowner Association Oversight Act. Yep, there's a whole branch of the state government that deals with exactly this kind of petty tyranny. And guess who had just filed a formal complaint backed up with? Karen's face was priceless, like someone had just told her yoga pants were out of style. She stood there, frozen mid-speech, her perfectly curled hair practically deflating under the weight of what I'd just said. I didn't shout. I didn't even raise my voice. I just let the words hang in the air like smoke after a shot. Clear, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Behind me, murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Some people leaned forward. Others looked down at their laps, suddenly very aware that they'd been part of something they probably shouldn't have been. Karen tried to recover quickly, but the damage was done. Is this some kind of threat? She snapped, gripping the edge of the podium like it was the last life raft on the Titanic. I smiled sweetly. Not a threat, Karen. Just information. Then I opened binder number 1. The first audio clip started playing through the small speaker I'd hooked up. It was Karen herself, caught red-handed during one of our many casual HOA chats, talking about how she could make things hard for residents who didn't play by the rules. And not just any rules, her rules. Another recording followed, Nancy admitting that Tyler had been giving Paige shooting lessons without permits, while Karen signed off on every expense like it was official club business. Photos flashed up next. Side-by-side shots showing my mailbox height exactly matched HOA standards, my dangerous flower pot, and the wide-open backyard gate that had mysteriously unlatched itself the night before Toby's animal-at-large violation. One by one, I laid it all out, not with drama, not with vengeance, but with facts. Clean, cold, unshakable facts. And then came the real kicker. I held up the printed copy of the state complaint and walked it over to the board table. This is case number 2024-7631, I said, placing it directly in front of Karen. An investigator has already reached out to several of you for statements. If you haven't heard from them, yet you will. You could hear a pin drop. Even Mr. Collins, who had been snoozing in the third row, woke up long enough to glance nervously at his donut like it might betray him too. Karen's eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but the tide had turned. People who once nodded along with her rants now avoided eye contact. A few even shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about accountability. And Karen? For the first time since I'd met her, she had no script. She tried to rally, sputtering something about outside agitators and disrespect for community values, but her voice cracked halfway through, and the motion to evict me died faster than a firework in the rain. By Monday, the HOA board had voted unanimously to suspend Karen pending the state investigation. Tyler quietly disappeared for a while, and Nancy resigned from the treasurer position citing personal reasons. As for the shooting range, new leadership stepped in elected this time, and the rulebook got trimmed from 14 pages down to 4. The mandatory seminar?
Gone.
The $25 fee? Cut in half. And the banner with Tyler's name? Let's just say it found a new home in the storage closet. But the biggest change?
People started speaking up.
Older residents who'd been too afraid to question anything suddenly felt brave enough to ask questions. Young parents who once worried about being blacklisted for a misplaced recycling bin began pushing back on unreasonable fines. It wasn't a revolution. Not really. It was just a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to be ignored to remind everyone else that they have a voice too. As for me, I went back to the range the following Saturday. Same dusty pickup, same battered ball cap. Only this time, when I raised my rifle, there were no sneers behind my back, just quiet respect and maybe a little awe. And when I pulled the trigger, well, let's just say the record still stands. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. If Karen had even a scrap of common sense left, she would have cut her losses, maybe taken a nice cruise, and let the whole mess blow over. But Karen wasn't built for common sense. She was built for spite. And nothing fueled her rage more than the fact that her carefully curated kingdom, the one she ruled with passive-aggressive emails and clipboard inspections, was starting to crumble because of me. So she did what any petty dictator would do when facing accountability. She went nuclear. The week after the failed expulsion meeting, I noticed a fresh wave of anonymous complaints swirling through the neighborhood. Someone reported that my front lawn didn't meet community standards, even though I had the greenest, most boring patch of grass on the whole block. Someone alleged my dog, Toby, barked aggressively at children. Never mind that Toby's main hobbies were napping and begging for belly rubs. Someone claimed I was operating an unlicensed business out of my home. Apparently, organizing my own garage counted as suspicious commercial activity. It was amateur hour. Karen wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. Meanwhile, I kept my cool because while Karen was busy throwing spaghetti at the wall and praying something would stick, I was preparing my final move. Now, let me back up a bit. Remember that formal complaint I filed with the State Department of Homeowners Association Oversight? Well, turns out they don't take kindly to HOA officials who forge proxy votes, misappropriate community funds, falsify violation notices, or engage in retaliatory harassment. They launched a formal investigation, and after reviewing the mountain of evidence I provided, they decided to escalate it. That's right. An investigator was coming in person. Not just a chat, a full public audit of the Willow Creek HOA. Every resident invited. Every financial record subpoenaed. Every questionable decision dragged into the daylight. Karen had spent years ruling by fear and manipulation. Now she was about to face the one thing she couldn't bully, the truth. The day of the audit felt like the Super Bowl of petty justice. The clubhouse was packed. People brought lawn chairs, popcorn, even sodas. Mr. Collins wore a kiss the cook apron like he thought it was a barbecue. At the front of the room stood Miss Monroe, the state investigator, a no-nonsense woman in a navy suit and sensible flats, armed with a laptop and a grim little smile. Karen looked well. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon soaked in battery acid. She tried, bless her soul, to spin it, tried to bluster about misunderstandings and outsiders trying to destroy the community. But Ms. Monroe wasn't here for Karen's bedtime stories. One by one, she went through the list. Unauthorized spending on security upgrades that turned out to be a new hot tub for Karen's backyard. HOA funds used for community events, specifically a $600 consulting fee paid to Tyler Briggs for hosting a gun safety class that never actually happened. Violations issued disproportionately against certain residents, namely, anyone who didn't fit Karen's mold of the ideal neighbor. And then, oh, it was beautiful. Miss Monroe pulled out the forensic audit of the most recent election. Turns out over 40% of the proxy votes submitted at the last board election had forged signatures, including dead people. Yes, Karen literally committed voter fraud using residents who had passed away. You could almost hear the collective gasp from the room. Nancy, the treasurer, looked like she might faint. Tyler Briggs was already halfway to the door. Mr. Collins just nodded sagely and muttered, "Knew it." But the piece de resistance? Miss Monroe revealed that Karen had been personally pocketing the $25 safety fees collected at the shooting range, over $8,000 total. No receipts. No reporting. Straight into her coach purse. She closed her laptop, looked around the room, and said very calmly, "Based on these findings, the state is placing Willow Creek HOA under provisional oversight. The current board is hereby dissolved effective immediately." The room erupted. Some cheered. Some just sat there stunned. Karen looked like a deflated pool float sagging in her folding chair, clutching her clipboard like it might save her. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The consequences hit fast and hard. Karen was removed from her position and barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for a minimum of 10 years. She faced civil penalties totaling over $50,000. Residents voted in a new board, real volunteers, not Karen's inner circle. Tyler Briggs was banned from using the shooting range indefinitely for fraud and misconduct. And me? While I was officially cleared of every bogus violation, the flower pot stayed. Toby kept napping. The lawn remained gloriously, boringly green. A few weeks later, I saw Karen for the last time. She was loading boxes into the back of an aging SUV. Her face set in that tight, bitter expression she wore like a second skin. She caught me watching from my porch. For a moment, I thought she might scream or spit or unleash one final petty insult. Instead, she just shook her head, climbed into her car, and drove away. No goodbye. No apology. Just the faint smell of sour grapes lingering in the hot summer air. Was I sad? Not even a little. Some battles aren't about revenge. They're about respect. About showing bullies like Karen that they can't run roughshod over people just because they hold a clipboard and know how to weaponize petty rules. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the simple woman they laugh at is the one who takes their little kingdom down, piece by piece, shot by shot. When Karen finally disappeared down Willow Creek Lane for the last time, it felt like a heavy fog had lifted. You could almost hear the whole neighborhood exhale one long, relieved breath after years of holding it in. It didn't happen overnight. Healing rarely does. But the change, it was real. And it was beautiful. First, there was the election. For the first time in years, the HOA board held a real vote. No hot dog bribery. No shady proxy signatures. No whispered threats. Just simple ballots. Real people. Actual democracy. The candidates weren't perfect. They were school teachers, retired engineers, small business owners, folks with no interest in empire building, just neighbors who wanted to mow their lawns without getting fined for it. And who did the residents elect as the new HOA president? Not me. Heaven help me. I had no desire to spend my weekends parsing bylaw amendments or debating what color the gazebo should be. No, the new president was a spry 72-year-old named Mrs. Harrove, a retired librarian with a spine of steel and a Rolodex full of state contacts. You've never seen bureaucracy fear a woman until you've seen a librarian wield a statute book like a broadsword. Under the new leadership, Willow Creek transformed. The ridiculous petty rules?
Gone.
No more $50 fines for mailbox flags. No more $70 penalties for an extra potted plant.